about what public policy as a segment or a sector is going to look like. We're going to take a deep dive into what policy writing or writing in the public policy space is going to look like. I'm going to welcome everyone, whoever's taken the time again to come and join on a weekday. I'm Tanya, Mittal, and today we're taking this deep dive into this art of public policy writing, which I sincerely think is an art and a science. So whether you're crafting these memos for public policy makers, like I said earlier, just those 10 seconds, you have to make something very quick, something very, very relevant. Or even if you're somebody who's sort of writing op-eds, you're tweeting, you're writing Twitter threads, you are fighting with someone, an academician or some thinker who's posted something on their Twitter, I think all of it contributes in some sense to what would construe as public policy writing. And there are two facets to this, which I'm going to sort of explain eventually. I'm also sort of very excited to be here at the Rise Pico World Summit because I think it's a global platform where a lot of professionals, CSR, public policy, researchers, change makers, all of us sort of come together. A lot of brilliant minds, like-minded folks come together and they're discussing all kinds of pressing global issues. And more importantly, I think more than issues, what we need are solutions, right? And that's what public policy writing does as well. And with that quick introduction, I'll drop one quick question in the poll, or perhaps sort of take a very, very quick understanding of from the audience. If anybody wants to write this in the chat, I mean, we can go from there. I don't see a very, very large number, so yeah, we can sort of skip this part too. But my first question would be what do you think makes policy writing effective, and how is policy writing any different from all the creative writing we've done? I mean, we were in school when we were taught this for the first time in that English lecture, or we were told that, oh, there's a creative writing class, you either write a prose or a poem, and you have to come up with something really nice, some interesting idea. So what is so different from what you learned in school versus what consists as a clear and a concise paragraph in a public policy write-up, right? There's not much difference. So to break your bubble, there isn't really a lot of difference. But there are, of course, facets to it. There are nuances to it, like there's clear, concise language. There are data-driven arguments. There's always a compelling storyline. So one thing that really distinguishes, but also at the same time makes public policy writing similar to creative writing is the fact that there is always going to be a story, right? I'll quickly talk about my experience. That's a picture of me in Dr. Shashi Tharoor's office. I had my first research internship in Dr. Tharoor's office, where I assisted a lot of the parliamentary writing that the office was midst of, because we were also there posted during the monsoon bill as well as the winter session. So it was a lot of learning for me, because the two parliamentary sessions that I could see, and him being a third-time parliamentary member, just about the time, this was back in 2021, he'd just been re-elected back from his home state, Thiruvananthapuram, and it was a great experience because he's not only somebody who's a parliamentarian, but he writes a lot of books, he writes a lot of op-eds, he keeps populating newspapers, news channels with a lot of his ideas. So critique to that, or somebody who just was learning from being in his office, there were some key insights that I'll also share here. Moving on to another very nice experience that I had with the Observer Research Foundation. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. There was a report that I co-authored with my mentor at the time on air quality and also economic diplomacy. Some of the key areas that I focus on as a policy writer are, of course, air quality. I write about urban mobility, infrastructure, and I'm sort of happy even after the session to share the kind of writing I've done. If you wanted to have a look, check, and if you're just somebody who's sort of making inroads into this complex world that we think is of public policy, just feel free to have a look, give me your feedback. And then, of course, my most latest stint was at Federation of Indian Chambers of Commerce, which is FICCI, and I was working in the Africa desk there. Main role was, of course, government affairs, policy advocacy, and this is with stakeholders from the African continent. So that was also, again, a lovely experience. But let's quickly now start with how we can start our public policy writing journey. Okay. On that front, I'm just going to take a quick check if people can still sort of see my screen. I am assuming it's visible. I'm still audible. There was a little bit of a lag, so if people are just pouring in now, I just wanted to also give a disclaimer that I'm really sorry that my video is off, and you hopefully can still see my slides. So yeah. In the very beginning, I posed a question, and whoever's sort of new and has just come in the beginning, I said that okay, even if you're a policy insider or an outsider, this was a very distinct or a these were distinct terms that I used earlier. So that's exactly how I've tried to divide these slides also. Very often we find ourselves outside the public policy realm because we assume that, okay, there are legislators, there are policymakers, there are ministers who would require public policy writing very specifically for parliamentary processes or something that brings about new change, newer improvements, newer addendums, like it says on the slide as well. So these could be in forms of discovery papers. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. These are white papers, fact sheets, policy memos. These could be even grievance letters for that matter. Lok Sabha mein so often you have your ministers going and talking, MLAs in Rajya Sabha as well, going and talking about a lot of issues, or rather there is a lot of grievance redressal too, because you get a lot of representation from the audience, and here the audience primarily not only being your these don't have to be citizens only of your chosen constituency. These could be people all over India, people all over the world rather, writing into these ministers, and very often these get recognized too. I mean, as somebody who's worked in an international diplomat's office, what I realized is his representation was not only limited to okay what people of Kerala or people of Thiruvananthapuram were sort of saying to him. The kind of things that he was putting across in his question hours or 0 hours in a Lok Sabha were so global and so international. Issues of expats having issues, or like let's say a German student who's come on an exchange program and is studying in Kerala for her doctorate, and she faces certain issues with respect to public safety. I mean, those get a room to be voiced as well. But how is all of that happening, right? How are all of these people getting to speak all of these issues? How is this getting a platform? I feel like the most cornerstone of bringing about any kind of change, bringing about any kind of large scale impact is by writing it down. I mean, that's what we say, right? Like if you want to put things into motion, put things into action, write it down first. Think about a big dream you have 5 years from now, right? That's also an exercise and an activity I had planned. Given that we have a low count of folks today, I would rather just make it my rhetoric. The fact that 5 years, 10 years down the line, you're told कि एक dream होगा आपका, एक कुछ there are these goals that you have envisioned for yourself. Let's write it down. Let's break it into actionable blocks, and then sort of start acting upon them. And that's exactly all these lessons that apply to your public policy writing journey as well. But one thing that is very specific to when it comes to writing for policymakers is that the tone and the style here changes very dramatically from how it should be when you're writing for public consumption or things that you find in the newspaper. So we did a clear distinction of okay, creative writing versus public policy writing. Excuse me. Here, when it comes to writing for policymakers, I've given a couple of examples of what these are going to look like. I'm assuming a couple of us know what question hours or 0 hours in a Lok Sabha in our bicameral legislature look like. So these are very specific to the kind of representations that they get from people who are trying to sort of voice their opinions, their sort of their ideas for change. And it has to be extremely academic, be a very research heavy submission. And there are organizations right now existing which work very closely with these legislators. For instance, there's PRS. PRS has something called a LAMP fellowship. And even during my time as a research intern in Dr. Tharoor's office, we had a lot of LAMP fellows who used to aid and assist with these writings for question hours or 0 hours. And for that matter, we have a lot of other organizations which are working slightly more towards the side of, or rather, I'd say at the intersection of public policy and politics. And one such organization that I can think of is Politics for Impact. I had a stint with them where, again, I got to assist the writing of two key parliamentarians. One was, of course, our current Union Minister, Mr. Ram Mohan Naidu, Kinjarapu, and erstwhile he was TDP's leader as well. And of course, there was also Mr. Jaydev Galla. And the kind of writing that I see in these sort of institutions or the kind of forums that we have is very different from how I started my journey, right? I started my journey just writing a bunch of hogwash, honestly. And that's a lot to do with, how you've been trained in schools, you've been trained in colleges to, write a conclusion, come to a set of, have a very, very strict format. Here, formats are extremely different. You have to really cut to the point. You have 150 words. You have to cut it down. You really have to just make your point heard, right? So all of that dramatically changes, and that's what I mean by tone and style dramatically changes here. Now, after sort of understanding this a more close knit or a more tight knit set of papers or submissions, which are mostly reviewed or vetted by policymakers, we come to something or another segment which is a little more open and something that's more accessible and available to public consumption at large, which could be, like I said earlier, these are newspaper articles, blog pieces, op-eds. These could be your LinkedIn posts, right? You see a lot of Instagram threads these days. Instagram, in fact, has something called threads where they talk about, different slides where a lot of different ideas around policy are posted too. There are Twitter threads too. And what I've written on the slide is improving public policy discourse and ensuring a feedback mechanism in place. This is extremely, extremely crucial. I'm going to take a quick check and see if I'm still sort of audible, if there are more people joining in. I'm wondering if I should turn my camera on again and nobody's getting bored, but let me do that and see if there's still a bit of lag. I have a feeling the lag has gone because I switched my network. Can I take a quick check? Ankush, if you're still around, just let me know. Otherwise, I'll continue in a jiffy. Okay, I'm assuming there is not too much of a lag, so I'll continue. For people who are new, for people who just sort of think that public policy is this huge word that's sort of thrown around. It's like a buzzword in today's times. For the very basics, I feel that public policy allows a lot of different backgrounds to sort of come and intersect, which is a lovely thing. You can be coming from any background, be from a engineering background, finance, a health, a medicine background, and still find a lot of scope in public policy. So there is a lot of vantage point that you can bring from the discipline that you come from. And what I've also sort of come to realize as somebody who's been in the public policy there is that you can be a generalist and a specialist at the very same time. I think the fact that your discipline itself enhances your being a part of the public policy segment is extremely crucial as well. And then you get to understand very, very broad implications or understand things from a different lens as well. You just don't have a bird's eye perspective. It's a very, very a different way of looking at things. Let's say, for instance, this could be a very interesting example because I come across somebody at a interesting policy meetup and they talked to me about this. So there's Priya University, which is come up in Sri Ram city in Tamil Nadu, and this was funded by Raghuram Rajan, who of course we know that has been an out-and-out finance guy, right? Him starting an education institute, and then I had my chat with the person who had talked about this example. They said that, hey, I'm a student of Priya, and I just heard Mr. Raghuram Rajan come talk about Priya's foundation and how they went about mixing education, public policy and finance at the same time and create a model like this, right? And that's pretty similar to what a lot of educational institutions have done when it comes to including more public policy curricula or syllabuses in the country. You've got Kautilya School for Public Policy, there's Indian School for Public Policy, and so on and so forth. There's so many names that keep coming. So the fact that there's so much that can be done, even as somebody who's, let's say, just never ever thought that, okay, I wanted to enter the public policy sector, but eventually, you make a pivot. People often jargonize the sector and they assume that, okay, it's only policymakers, it's only legislators, MPs, MLAs, IS officers who are sort of existing in the sector. But now the scope is opened up so much. You have so many people working in research and advocacy, advisory, especially a lot of lobbyists and people really thriving in the lobbying space as well. It could be diplomatic lobbying, it could be within it could be domestic policy lobbying as well. And you have organizations working on this, you have Samagra Governance, there's Chase India, and a lot of names come to mind. We could go on and on about that. So this is something I used to do as my mentorship sessions when I used to have this with early graduates, folks who are still in their first year, second year, so just sort of navigating this complex world of public policy. I keep using this word complex because that's what people think. उन्होंने पहला first word ये मुझे बोला था when I've spoken to a lot of young students and like I said, early graduates, that if not UPSC, then what? I mean, मतलब public policy का मतलब UPSC होता है, right? I mean, that's one assumption that you hear a lot. And I'm just going to read out what's on the slide as well. So there's a lot of rising interest, amongst the youth. And here I'm going to give an age bracket of, let's say, 20s to 30s, because India being the most youthful population and the most youthful country in the entire globe, makes us really capable to come up with a lot of public policy change. I mean, imagine, just think of how many minds in the country can change the way we look at public policy. And yet we find, we still find a lot of, if I can just say it very bluntly, a lot of bureaucracy in the kind of policy implementation that happens. So there's a lot of discrepancy between policy thinking and policy thought versus policy implementation. So how can that gap sort of be bridged? This is where I think writing plays an important part. Even if you're somebody who's sort of starting out, who doesn't know much, but has a lot of ideas, right? You have a lot of ideas. You think that, this issue really speaks to me. Or this policy, the NEP 2020 आया तो था, बोला तो था, इतना कुछ multilinguistic predispositions, whatnot. So much was promised. What really happened after that? Is the education sector really changing? Is there something that I can contribute to it as, let's say, an educator or somebody who's perhaps a recent graduate, somebody who's been in the sector, who's done their MBA as well, and has new key insights from their discipline or their vantage point? That is just something I'm trying to drive home a point. But that can create a lot of progressive social change, like I said, and supported by India's demographic dividend, like I say on the slide as well. There's a report that Niti Aayog does called India at 95. They've identified at least a couple of crucial key areas for public policy professionals, right? There are aspirational districts, there's legal and judicial reforms, civil services reforms, modernizing city governance. Jargon aside, what I want to again and again sort of drive home a point is that even if you pick up the newspaper and you have like 5 ideas from, let's say, one piece that you picked up or one op-ed, or for that matter, you've focused on somebody's beat so much. You like somebody's beat, somebody's been writing for the print, somebody's been writing for the Hindu, for Times of India, and you really like what they're writing. Just start making a note of it. And that's exactly what UPSC training does as well. So I feel like then this is the kind of a pep talk or a motivation thing that I speak to younger folks as well, and I tell them that, okay, hey, UPSC के दौरान हमने काफी सारी चीजें note making बहुत सारी सीख ली, ये सीख लिया, वो सीख लिया, but these are, they reach out and say these are redundant skills. I don't think I learned much. I mean, I blew up a lot of money, I spent a lot of money, a lot of attempts, didn't make a cut. What do I do next? Gap year ho gaya, question mark. So I mean, for that I say that there are no skills that are redundant. I feel like in today's times, every skill can be made more transferable, and that's exactly what the need of the hour is, right? So in the 21st century, you do need more transferable skills. And if note taking is something that you get really good at during your training, why not just use it? There are so many organizations, like my experience at FICCI really taught me one thing is that many times you're not really going to get that say on the table. But if you constantly show up for meetings, make a lot of notes, are always well prepared, neatly polished with your thoughts, what you want to say, you never know, someday a dot might connect, and that could actually be your elevator pitch. So, hope for the very, very best. Again, there are sector niches in public policy that I wanted to talk about real quick. I'll read them out. There's consulting, there's public relations, government affairs, there's policy advocacy, lobbying, like I said, it's great in the thriving sector. The political campaigning, a lot of think tanks. Now, I want to focus a little more on think tanks and research institutes. These are heavily funded too, especially right now. I mean, the Observer Research Foundation, their sort of collaboration with the Ministry of External Affairs, where they organize something called the Raisina Dialogue every single year. And I've been very opportunity to attend a lot of their annual editions, and it's been a lovely experience, not purely from the kind of learnings that you hear from speakers on stage, but the networking you can do. And that's something that's extremely crucial to break your way into, get that foot in the door when it comes to public policy. I'm still going to take a quick check if I'm audible and people can still hear me, because I hope I don't sound like I'm going on a rant. Anything in the chat would be nice. I mean, if you just let me know if you can still hear me, if there are any points you had. Just feel free to sort of also stop me. I saw somebody writing that there's a lag at around 12:51. And I remember turning my cam off. Should I still do that? Should I turn my camera off and keep speaking? Because the slides get really interesting and the content is great too, but I'd love to just not make the lag make this a flop show. So that's what I just confirm this real quick. Yeah, I believe then I can turn my camera off and continue, because like I said, the slides get interesting and there are cool stories to add. Okay, back to think tanks. There are also a lot of research institutes and think tanks that are they're catering to very specific needs. Okay, so you have people working very, very specifically on economic issues. You have people working very, very specifically in these think tanks towards law, towards urban policy, towards technology. Like for instance, even the military space now has been decomplexified so much that you have think tanks that cater so specifically to air power, to naval power. You have something called CLAWS, which is the Center for Land and Warfare Studies. You have something called the ORF, which is the Observer Research Foundation. You have something called the NMF, which is the National Maritime Foundation. And the more you think about it, the more you realize is that a lot can be done in terms of informal lobbying, a lot of populating the public consumption space with policy writing, and that's what think tanks are also contributing to. I mean, it's definitely a long stretch. It's a long and a very enduring kind of a space to be in, because jab tak likhte rahoge, jab tak sort of lobby karte rahoge, I'm assuming people can understand a bit of Hindi also, some switching, and I'm hoping that you can still hear me. Like I said, I mean, the more you keep sort of being at it with your niche in public policy, the more you get heard, right? If you're constantly talking about, I'd also have a very, very lovely experience, which I thought I'll share with you all. I've been a podcaster. I've been podcasting for a while, and I still sort of work with the Indian Forum for Public Diplomacy, where I'm the head of policy and planning. And I used to have this lovely segment where I used to interview military veterans, a lot of folks in the military academia space as well, where all of these experts used to come talk about their interest in international relations and geopolitics. Now, that's also something that's very close to my heart, because back in college and back when I was in Lady Shri Ram College, I realized that while also doing my regular course, I also took up a PG diploma where I talked about and sort of course, learned more about peace and conflict, and this entire idea of how conflict resolution is very different from conflict transformation. And that's what is also sort of need of the hour. Nipping it in the bud might be like a very band-aid fix, but what more can be done in terms of transforming the way we look at conflict and peace in general is what was taught during that course. And it was such a moment of pride for me to know that Aung San Suu Kyi, I mean, of course, for various reasons now, it could be a highly debatable topic to sort of throw in the chat. But for various other reasons, that an international figure like her has also sort of graduated from that college. But now again, of course, like I said, it may be extremely debatable to mention that name. But back in a time, just purely from a sheer lens of me being a freshie in college and taking up that course, and also knowing that okay, that was the institute was named after her. That's the course I've done. Hence mentioned the name. Quickly back to the sector niches, talked about public services, international policy. But okay, now a little more towards the policy writing aspect. How can you become better? How can you polish your skills? Do you all remember that in the very beginning I talked about something and I said that, hey, public policy writing requires you to have, is my screen still visible? Sorry, I'm just taking quick checks just to know if it's visible. If there's anything, you can let me know. Yeah. But anyways, like I said, I think policy writing requires great story writing too. Always having a compelling story behind everything that you write, even if it's addressing policy issues, having a broader storyline in place is extremely important. Let's move on to the next slide. There are some key skills that you should have as a policy writer. Let's name it out. There's research analysis, there's advocacy strategies, effective communication, and of course, like I said, this word content, which gets highly thrown around in today's times, right? You're like, do this for the content, do that for the content. And a lot of youngsters also use this word a lot because of course, for social media consumption, we like using the word content, but content writing for a very specific reason here, which is being policy platforms. And like I said, in today's times, with the fact that there are not too many silos in public policy writing, and how to break those silos, I think that's where policy platforms are now being created as well. And by that, I mean now, let's say there is a youth run forum that I have been actively tuning into, which is called the Policy Tank. And then I have a lot of my folks and friends who work with the Public Policy Network. I sort of talked about Indian Forum for Public Policy and Diplomacy, which was a couple of minutes ago. I said that I'm associated with them. So these newer platforms that are sort of being created and still require you to write blogs for them, write content for them. So what I'm trying to also get at is that if you are not sure that, okay, how do I start my public policy writing journey, target these places, target the think tanks that I mentioned earlier as well. I mean, these are great places to get associated and also get a good brand initially, right? Get your writing, there should always be a good feedback loop or a mechanism that you get, because initially, like I said, and I keep saying this a lot, I'm like, मैं कुछ भी लिख रही हूँ, it's all hogwash. But how would I know unless I have 3 people comment on it and tell me that, hey, listen, you posted that Medium blog the other day and you talked about, I keep giving NEP as an example, so let's take that again. You talked about the NEP 2020. I feel like there are a lot of flaws in the way you've written it. And hey, what I've also realized is that this is not something I agree with, which is fine, which is absolutely fine, because what all of this constructs is it's like a very constructive criticism that you can get from people, and then implement it further in some polished form that you produce later. If you want to refine your article, pitch it to a better place, right? You can always take that feedback home, and always know who is your primary audience for policy writing, right? I'll move to the next slide. And I also want to really, really focus on this slide the most, because this is something we started with in the very beginning. Now, the slide has been titled The Excitement of Discovery. Okay. Do you all know the story of Newton? Everybody, I hope, in the chat knows, and I'm assuming y'all are still listening. There are some people who are still not bored. And this doesn't seem like a monologue and a rant, because I'm not seeing too much engagement in the chat. But in case if you still yeah, think there are things you want to add to the chat at any given point, stop me. Please do feel free. We have sort of planned this as a workshop, so I was hoping that there'll be a little more engagement. So I'm still sort of going to request on that. Back to excitement of discovery. Newton की कहानी सबको पता है. The apple fell on his head. He had an epiphany moment और उसको एक नया idea मिला. Now मैंने यहाँ पे लिखा है what does reading teach us, and मेरे को लगता है that the biggest excitement of discovery comes from reading. Anything that you're reading, be it a newspaper article, be it a fiction, a non-fiction book, gives a lot of ideas in our minds. And those 10 seconds, you remember in the beginning that I talked about an elevator pitch. I said that कि वो 10 second कितने crucial होते हैं, because a lot can be done with the ideas that you get. In 10 seconds, you can make an entire pitch. I mean, the human brain is so potent and has so much potential and so much creativity to think of things. And imagine what one single idea can do, right? I mean, the apple falling gave us gravity, for God's sake. So imagine what all you can think of, just given that, okay, if you consume more than just what's on Netflix or what's on Reels or what's on social media. I mean, like our elders also say that how much is really given in social media, but optimize it. Optimize your time everywhere you are. Let's say we already know there's a lot of data stealing. We're sort of in this panopticon. This is my analogy, which I give a lot. This panopticon surveillance that you are under 24/7. You are being controlled, monitored. So give yourself also the same kind of authority or the leverage to just optimize the most that social media can give you. And this reading that I'm talking about can be the books, like I said, fiction, non-fiction, anything you're reading on threads. Aajkal kitna kuch aata hai on Twitter threads, so much that you can find on Instagram. And share these ideas with your network, share these ideas in your own public spaces if you think you're a part of some forum, if you're still in college and you are a part of any reading circle or a book discussion club, right? Always know that reading can make or break for better writing. And George Orwell, who's one of my favorites, has written this lovely piece, which is like my gold standard when it comes to writing. And what I might do is later in the chat drop that article for you. And also there's another lovely place to get started with when it comes to reading is this draft, this tiny article of it's just the 2 pages, very nice. It's called My Shitty First Drafts. And in case somebody has read it and sort of recognizes what I'm talking about, can also leave a comment in the chat. But the fact that article, and so does what George Orwell write in Why Write Well, he says that always emphasize on the joy of discovering new ideas that inspire action. And ideas always lead to action. Thought always leads to action. But how do you work on that? That is where that policy writing can sort of bridge the gap. I'll move on real quick because the next slide is also equally interesting. I've talked about this connection between reading and writing. How do you have or how do you see a linkage between the two? There are tips that I've given on the screen as well. I'm assuming you can still see the screen. Becoming a better reader also equally denotes to you becoming a better writer, and that's my personal belief. I'm a strong believer of reading well and reading sharp commentaries. In the very beginning of my reading journey, let me tell you a very nice and interesting story. Let me get my camera back on because you see all the expressions on my face because I'm extremely excited about this story. I was back in the 4th grade, and I remember that I had my UK NRI mama come and gift me one book, which was My Family and Other Animals by Gerald Durrell. And now British authors, तो चलो छोड़ो, मैंने Indian authors कुछ नहीं पढ़े थे. I was just in the 4th grade and I had no idea what words, what this, what that. But the excitement of discovery when I found new words, and then I have for the first time used it. I didn't even have a phone, the Google, nahi, kuch nahi. I still remember going to that Oxford dictionary, the pocket dictionaries that you were told mandatorily in colleges and schools कि नहीं ये लेके जाना है. तो school में बोलते थे कि get a pocket dictionary, and I remember getting that dictionary along with me, and I mugged this, told this word that I found in the book called apparition. And एक दिन एक class चल रही थी, I still remember, and I still remember this teacher so vividly teaching in class about we were reading Hound of Baskerville. It could shake Sherlock Holmes. We had been given this very lovely Arthur Conan Doyle had written this story, and we were reading about it in class, and I dropped this word. Like I sort of mic dropped this word, and I said apparition, and not a lot of people knew this in fourth grade. So my teacher sort of called me. She said, let's write it on the board and everything, and I felt very nice about it. And from that day onwards, I made this a pledge, because the teacher, what she did from that day onward is start writing a word of the day on the board. And I know this is not a big deal, and I don't know why I've chosen this platform to come and talk about this story, but what I'm just trying to drive a point or sort of tell you is also that word of the day उससे पहले नहीं होता था. स्कूल में बहुत स्कूल्स में होता होगा, पर मेरे उस क्लासरूम में word of the day नहीं होता था. And nobody used to really write it on the board. But the fact that okay, one student who brought up a new word in class has inspired so many other students to get one pocket Oxford dictionary, read at least 3 pages a day, find some new words, and then find the correlation and meaning of it is such a good discovery, right? And that is what I call this loop and this excitement of discovery. And again, I'll go back to reading from the slide, and so that you know that okay, these are the ways you can become better readers. Read a variety of genres to diversify your perspectives. The generalist and the specialist talk that I did at the very beginning, that you can be a generalist even in the public policy realm, even if you're coming from a different discipline or very varied disciplines, you can still contribute a lot because of your academic training, a lot that you've learned in the past. Your professional training has taught you a ton of things. You're a media person and you're still talking a lot about public policy, and you're talking about what are issues that are relevant to the public. I mean, policy in general is what is relevant to us, them, and us, right? And engage with critical thinking. I always get into Twitter and thumb fights with people, and I think it's the best way to enhance your critical thinking. Okay, then that for the thrill of it, for the fun of it, go and engage with somebody online. I'm not asking you to be a Twitter Nazi or be somebody who's like an armchair activist, if you get what I'm trying to say. I'm not asking you to do that. All I'm telling you is that if you find somebody's work really interesting, like I said, somebody's beat is super cool and they write for the Mint, they write for the Print, they write for Hindustan Times, and you found them on Twitter and you like what they've been posting, just go and engage with them socially on social media. If you find them at some networking event, don't hesitate not to go pitch your ideas. And I think all of it really starts and emanates from the fact that if you've read something really well or you know your idea very well, you will automatically have the voice to pitch it better. And if you write it, voila, even better, even better. You have things, you have a structure in mind and a structure in place. And always question, like I said, question things that you read, analyze arguments, always apply your analytical thinking and your creative thinking. So your right and your left side of the brain should work really well. And all the palmists or any palm readers who ever told you that, oh no, your right side is better functioning and your left side is better functioning, is all bullshit. I'm not a big fan when it comes to palm reading or any kind of kundli thinking or reading, etc., etc. But I'm a big fan of just reading. Kundli reading nahi pata, but this reading I know, and that's what I'm going to keep sort of emphasizing. And like I said, in the very end, note taking or note making and making your personal, like I have this, I don't know if it's a fun habit, but I keep doing this a lot. I keep annotating things on my laptop. I'm very savvy with my Kindle now and my tablet, so I keep annotating whatever I find interesting. I keep highlighting, and that is also something that's linked automatically and directly to being a better writer. So, if you practice writing summaries of what you read, just to reinforce the kind of understanding you had the text, I mean, you're back to college. Come on, you can use those and apply those transferable skills, like I said earlier, right? Whatever you're learning in college is so relevant to what you will also do on your job, especially when it comes to public policy, right? Or if you're just writing for fun also, or like I said, the public consumption part of it. Experiment with different writing styles and formats, blogs, essays, reports. Now, I'm a big fan of Medium. I mean, I don't know what I'd do if I wasn't on Medium and writing and populating my own Medium blog. I'd love to share that also with you. In fact, I'll share an instance of when I wrote for the World Economic Forum, and perhaps after the session also, in case you ever want to reach out, let me scroll up to the very beginning and show you that's my email ID right there. Do feel free to write to me, because in a lot of my earlier mentorship sessions, I've had people sending me their dissertations saying that, hey, this is something we've written. We want to take an opinion, take some outlook, some perspective. So yeah, feel free to do that, and I'll leave it back now. Like I said, what was I saying? I said that yes, there are different writing styles, formats, blogs, essays, and I'm a big Medium person. Somebody at the same time that I know from my circle is extremely active on Twitter and loves posting on Twitter. Someone I also know is a content creator for Instagram, and that itself is a very it's a heavy duty work or a role to take up. So them sort of working for their own platform called GeoStartup. Similarly, a lot of student-run forums where I've also sort of been mentoring, sort of been giving my voice to, also require this constant lens, policy lens to whatever reels they're posting, any kind of content they're posting. Yeah, so that is also a way you can get start engaging a little more, and then seek feedback is something that goes without saying. I mean, you always need to seek more feedback. Ask people to just always uh, critically review, or more or less give a very constructive or a holistic criticism to what you are writing. Don't be in the assumption that it's going to be a bed of roses, that hey, you've written your first piece and ye to jaake ye to abhi publish ho jana chahiye, right? It takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of coming to terms with your own writing. I think when you start feeling comfortable in the way you write, and that also, mind you, might not sit very well with some three people, right? You could be the only person who likes what you're writing and you're comfortable in your skin and you've said that you've declared, hey, they should get published. But there are many times that feedback loop or that feedback mechanism, like I said earlier, should really reinforce in your mind that, okay, there are 10 more people who will be reading this. And is it really public consumption worthy? Yes or no? Question mark. You should always keep asking yourself. I'm not sure if this is getting boring, if you are still sort of listening. There are a few people as well. But the tone and the style that I talked about in the very beginning, there's a lot of linkage, by the way, in the kind of slides I've made to what we started at the beginning. So in case somebody's come, dropped off, somebody snoozed, because it's lunchtime also, so nobody should be forced to sit and listen to this. But just in case you have followed through and through, in the beginning I talked about the tone and the style, which is very nuanced and specific to when it comes to just writing for policymakers or writing within that spectrum of the legislative writing, etc. So that has to be very concise, very persuasive, and something that I enforce so much and I talk about so much in my sessions in the past also, that use evidence-based arguments. Now, evidence can be so strong, a lot of different but legit data sites, especially Government of India records, because if you're an Indian writing for even a newspaper beat and you are writing for an op-ed perhaps or a blog piece, going through Government of India records, ministry posts a lot of data sheets, data sets. And if you have this like a passion for data crunching and data factoring, statistical factoring, all of this comes into handy. So even if you're thinking, oh, I've done my MBA, मैंने ये किया, okay, all of this, what is my relation? I mean, I'm not mocking people who've done that. All I'm just telling my brother who's now on that path of pursuing his MBA, and he's somebody who's from a statistics background. He has always 24/7 just mocked the fact that, hey, benefit इतना कुछ किया, what am I supposed to do about writing, or how can I become a writer? And that's a legit question. He asks me that not only from a point of view of trying to mock the fact that there's so many sessions you keep doing, but also how can I also contribute, right? And everybody can become a public policy writer. And that's what I keep telling him. I used to tell him that, hey, if this is something you're good with, and he and I sat together for a research project one time, and I had to write something about representation of women parliamentarians across the globe. Then we took three examples, three continents. We took South Asian economy, we took Indonesia, we took India as an example, and I think South Africa. And I really used him. I used him for help. I said, listen, hey, this is what I need some help with my table. मुझे तो jargon नहीं समझ आ रहा है इतना. Why don't you help me sit with me? And that was such a fantastic and a well researched paper. Of course, he should have gotten the co-authorship there, given that I took a lot of help from him. But yeah, that's what I mean by evidence-based arguments. It can also be driven or taken from the kind of arguments that you find of other authors that you either wish to contest or wish to complement with your own writing. So that could be something to do as well. Avoid jargon and aim for clarity. That's point number 3 in Roland's style. Now, avoiding jargon or de-jargonizing something is so crucial. I say this one thing, and I'm going to repeat it for the audience too, that assume your audience is a grade 8 or a grade 9 student who is, reading a paragraph for the first time. They don't know much information, all these abbreviations, big acronyms we use, B2B, B2D, B2G. And these are good and fancy when it comes to writing articles because, they get flagged very well. But what I also believe is that if you're just starting to write your blog for the first time and you want to explain, it's like an explainer piece. Have you seen the explainer pieces in the Hindu on page number 8 or the Times of India for that matter? Right? They do explainer pieces. Those should be target. Those should be the gold standard, like I talked about earlier, just to start getting used to how you can make your articles and your blog pieces more clear, there should be more clarity. And the fact very simple. If there's a big word that you find and you want to please do use it. Always use fancy big words, or don't always try and be a rule to get your point across. Simple words can also do the deed. And structure is something I'll focus on next. I wanted to start from the right to the left this time. So yeah, structure, always think of a good, great introduction, and I'll give an example with the next slide as to how we can. Again, I emphasize so much on the NEPs, so I'm going to come back to the example. Yeah, there should be a brief context and a problem statement or a research statement or a research puzzle. I'm assuming there are some folks here who have some research experience, have been researching for some time, or if you're completely new, something that you are taught in research methodology, especially when it comes to qualitative research or quantitative research too, is the fact that have a research question ready. And in research questions के सब क्वेश्चन हो सकते हैं. इसका एक रिसर्च पजल का एक पूरा framework हो सकता है जिसके those pointers that you are giving, arrow marks that I'm talking about, you should sort of always link it back to one central problem statement. And there's an exercise that we used to do. I've also done a course in social entrepreneurship from Tata Institute, and there something I've been taught is a problem mapping skill, right? And in problem mapping, everything is getting related to everything. So the interlinkages of problems and not having a solution bias is something that's extremely important. And that's what your problem statement should do as well. Your conclusion or some portions towards the back end of your article should naturally move towards suggesting a solution, suggesting some kind of a change, suggesting something new, an addendum, etc. But the very beginning should always talk about the problem statement. I'm assuming there's a bit of a lag, so I'm going to still keep my camera off and still keep focusing on the points that I had. The point number 2 is analysis, present data, present expert opinions. They could be case studies, anything you can do to distinguish or sort of add or complement your idea. Then finally comes recommendations. Like I said, that final portion or section of your article, your blog, your research paper should always have some recommendations, some solutions, something that you find interesting. And this is where your mind can run wild. We talked about the Newton gravity ideas. We talked about the excitement of discovery. Ab jab ideas aa rahe hain, why not implement them or why not put them into writing? Um, I did some very interesting work with Center for Civil Society where we were supposed to interview and sort of immerse ourselves with communities of women street vendors in very popular markets. One was Janpat, which I am assuming some people know. This is based in Delhi. And the second is Hasanpura market in Rajasthan. And all the work that we done was post-pandemic. So it was sort of also understanding from a policy lens कि pandemic के क्या effects या implications या ramifications have been on the women street vending community, especially women. I keep emphasizing on women because that was our population size, that was our target interview group also. We kept asking them that what are some issues, some challenges. आपका online कोई भी sale हुआ? Has e-commerce sort of changed the way you look at street vending? Has street vending been has it provided any bread and butter to you during COVID? Right? We came with a lot of questions, a lot of um, research puzzles, like I said. And those ideas that we got from the women, these were not out and out ideas, or these were not suggestions you got from the get go. It was only after going through our interview transcripts, really, really digging deep into अच्छा इन्होंने क्या बोला था जिससे कुछ नया suggest हो सकता है, and of course also finding data that's already existing. So always doing a very strong literature review is extremely crucial. Like I've said, present data, present expert opinions, but how do you do that? जब पता ही नहीं है कि what somebody else has written on the space, you can't be a know-all of the subject until and unless you start contesting or complementing subject matter experts. And that can only happen when you do a good reading, a good literature review, an intense literature review even before you get started. And finally, what we realized is, okay, in my time at CCS, that okay, women don't have access to toilets. Streets are inherently unsafe for women. So imagine vending or hawking or such professions and practices on the streets. How daunting can they be for women? And that was the entire idea. We came up with some lovely recommendations. We came up with a policy brief too. It was published as well. We talked about something called the Swanidhi scheme, which gives a certain amount of remuneration or in terms of retrenchment when women are facing a loss of livelihoods during the pandemic itself. So a lot of interesting things came about, and that's what I think pressure groups, CSOs, NGOs, which are working on very specific or working with very specific target populations, can also do. And that is also some kind of policy change or policy advocacy that can exist. Now, identifying the core issue, that should actually be my step number one. But sometimes we don't know what we want to write about. And a question I get asked so often is that, hey, maybe I haven't read so much. How should I have a policy opinion of my own? Or hey, I have read a lot of ideas. I have a lot of different ideas, but I don't have a very strict political opinion or a political leaning or alignment somewhere. तो मैं लिखूं तो opinion piece लिखूं तो opinion किस बारे में दूं? And that's something I get asked a lot. In that scenario, in that case, always choose something that's timely and that's relevant. It could be a newspaper article you've read today, and you have been reading about it for the last 1 week. It's been in the news channels there, it's being covered. It's a very debatable issue. Republic News or some 9 p.m. debate has come and just, battered that issue like anything. चार लोगों ने अपना opinion एक party से दूसरी party से दिया है, right? And you find it interesting and comical at the same time, and you're like, ये क्या हो रहा है? I mean, why are they discussing it like lunatics, and why are they being children about it? So perhaps in that scenario, how you as a more well-read or a more well-researched person who has read and done that literature review can contribute to the debate, please feel free. Please do feel free and give a more nuanced understanding by identifying the core issue here, right? So many times that in jargon or complex arguments and debates around a matter, we forget to identify the core issue, or the matter at hand is sort of lost in translation. So bringing that back is it's crucial as well. I take a quick pause because I feel I've been speaking for a long time. And the session is all the way up to 2:45, but we can also sort of take a tiny break. I'm assuming it's lunch hour. There are people in the chat who might want to have lunch, have taken a lunch break, and this is just going on on the laptop in the meanwhile, and I'm sort of sorry, they're sort of on mute. Um, so yeah, I'll take a quick pause. I'll let you stay on the slide. If you want to take some screenshots as well, feel free. And yeah, let me take a 1 to 2 minute break, and then let's come back in the live chat. If you are still around, just send me a hi, or yeah, let me know if you are still there. Okay. Okay, lovely. I'm back live, and I'll quickly just ruminate on the slide when there are some tips that I've figured out which might help you also when it comes to writing well. It might be a repetition of what was said in the past. I'll keep my video off itself. Perhaps it's yeah, it's making my video shaky too. While writing, don't use jargon or complex language. It can be something that's sort of explained in simple, lucid terms. Do that. Write in a way that you have a conversation with the reader. Always assume that your reader is new to the topic. They don't know much about the topic. So you can keep reading to yourself whatever you've written, read it out aloud, and then you'll realize if you're losing coherence of that piece, if you're finding relevance to that piece. All of it comes by doing a round of reading with yourself. Point number 3 is keep it straight and direct. Don't repeat points unless unnecessary jargon is coming and you feel like you want to get it removed from your text. Do find simpler ways you can put it. Do not elaborate unnecessarily. If something can be said, simply do that. Something that I've been told to do right now in the session too. If I don't have to elaborate too much and I can make a point, which is why I'm on this slide right now. And point number 4, write in a reverse Bollywood format. Now, what is that? Why is that? I have a story for this as well. I'll make it real quick, honestly, and I'll talk to you about that too. So all of us have like sort of watched Bollywood movies, and we know that what Bollywood masala we like the most is when in the end the villain is sort of defeated and the hero triumphs and he gets the girl, he gets the actress, and that's the end. We've always liked masala movies like that, right? Nobody likes a boring climax. Nobody likes the death of an actor. Nobody. I mean, the reason why Sholay was such a different movie or a different format in its time, so path-breaking, is because imagine Amitabh Bachchan or a big, show-stopping hero like him dying, on screen. That itself has created a lot of change in the way we look at cinema too. But yeah, I mean, back to the point, what I've realized is that if you all have seen a pyramid, and for this I should have turned my camera back on, but just imagine a pyramid in your head and rather a triangle in your head. And the bottom of your pyramid should have that climax. Your middle should have a story, and your upper portion of the pyramid of the triangle should have your intro. Now reverse that around, right? What if you started with the climax? And what if sari story ka masala pehले ही दे दिया? So what? And what happens next? I mean, that's something I talk about in our writing workshops as well. And I say that there are examples to this, but maybe for another time. The fact that you can sort of break down your problem statement in the very get go. You talk about it as a good hook for your audience, and then you start explaining it. You give a story to it. You give of course, the most relevant part here is giving an introduction, a background, a history to it, and then you go ahead and give a conclusion or a very good set of recommendations or solutions, right? And always have a compelling story narrative to whatever you are writing. We can cut this short too, but yeah, I'll now stop sharing my screen. And those are some skills and some points that I had with respect to writing well.